It's a wonderful confluence to have Francis DeSales on January 24th and the conversion of St. Paul the Apostle on January 25th. But for a preacher who's supposed to be celebrating Heritage Week, it was quite an issue for me on which one I was going to preach on. So what I decided to do was simply begin by saying, the first time I was in Rome to visit the dicastery known as the Pontifical Council for Social Communications. You walk right up the Via della Conciliazione, you see the St. Peter's, and the first office on the left is Social Communications. You go up the steps, and you see this beautiful mosaic of Francis DeSales. Then you go in and you see one of St. Paul, because both of them were really good communicators. We can see Francis DeSales communicating the naturalness of loving God, doing it according to our state in life. And obviously St. Paul, in one of his superb homilies to the Greeks in the Areopagus, he tells them in his hymn to an unknown God that there's something beautiful in all of the created world that's communicated right to the human heart. And so at the intersection of both Francis and Paul, I'd like to talk about the major theme of the feast today, and that's conversion. It's not necessarily about St. Paul, it's about the conversion of St. Paul. Think of his conversion. He never read Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. They weren't published. And his whole life was all about that mystical experience he had of Jesus Christ. And for centuries, his power through his written word reverberates even to this day. Think of the gospel. Mark tells us that when we're baptized and we go out there communicating God's love and peace, we're going to be able to speak new languages, drive out demons, pick up serpents with our bare hands, drink deadly poison, and lay hands on the sick. Who would want to do that? But Mark is trying to underscore that when we are equipped with the zeal and the passion to communicate God's love, amazing things happen. And so for the remainder of my homily, I'd like to just dimensionalize this important theme of conversion for all of us as we celebrate and remember Wayne Kraft. I want to use the great Jesuit theologian and philosopher Bernard Lonergan. He has a concise description of conversion that can help us look at its implications beyond individual conversion. Let me quote him. He says, "Conversion is existential, intensely personal, and utterly intimate. But it's not so private to be solitary. It can happen to many, and they can form a community to sustain one another in their self-transformation and help one another in working out the implications and fulfilling the promises of their new life. So finally, what becomes communal can become historical." Now, I think Lonergan's description of conversion is spot on, and it seems that you and I are witnesses to its truth. No conversion is ever private. Maybe you could imagine so if someone lived on a desert island or in Center Valley and had a conversion. Who would be affected by it except that one person? That would be the rare instance, not the norm. I always loved Mark Twain when he spoke about conversion. He says, "I've been through some terrible things in life, some of which actually happened." How often do we attach stories and tall tales about our own conversion and try to make it so magical when we forget it's utterly communal, historical, and personal? And so what I like to do is break down those three parts very briefly. Conversion as personal. In the spiritual directory that St. Francis de Sales gave to the Visitation Sisters, and that we Oblate Fathers, Brothers, and Oblate Sisters try to live each day, he has a section called Useful Instructions. This brief line appears under that heading. "Everyone must perfect him or herself according to their vocation." This is an instruction given to each oblate and visitandine sister. And so I ask all of us tonight, what is our vocation? Right now, I look at our students there, primarily it's to be a student. to be a husband, to be a wife, to be a Dominican, to be a deacon, whatever that is, to be married. So let's take some time today and really relish our vocation. The short and obvious answer for someone like myself is to be an oblate. But for all of us, what is our unique vocation? Again, in that spiritual directory, one section is particularly instructive regarding perfection according to one's vocation. I find some words of DeSales so wise for us in understanding what personal conversion is all about. And Francis calls this his old lesson. He says it's be yourself, follow your heart. Be yourself, follow your heart. And then he says this, don't sow your desires in someone else's garden. Just cultivate your own as best as you can. Don't long to be other than what you are, but desire to be thoroughly who you are. Direct your thoughts to being very good at that and to bearing the crosses, little or great, that you will find there. Believe me, this is the most important yet least understood point in the spiritual life. We all love what is according to our own taste, and few people like what is according to their duty or to God's liking. I said this at the graduation on Saturday. What's the use of building castles in Spain when you have to live in France? Secondly, conversion as communal. I'm sure we're all familiar with the golden aphorism that got popular when Hillary Clinton many years ago wrote her book, It Takes a Village. But the truth is, it really does take a village to form a person. It takes a community to shape people, and hopefully all of us here are richer for it. I think of the wonderful opportunity that so many of us have here at DeSales University to shape one another, to rub up against one another, and to rub off on one another. We need one another as we go through this semester and the whole context of our education. And finally, conversion as historical. We stand on the shoulders of countless lay colleagues and oblates, especially Wayne Kraft, here at DeSales University, some whose names we never have heard, and others whose faces we can see as clearly as if they were right in front of us. We stand in a tradition of a conversion that has become historical in the life and mission of DeSales University. Conversion on an historical level doesn't happen overnight in our own lives or in the life of the university. I was struck by the practicality of St. Francis de Sales' advice in the Golden Counsels, and I quote, "You must hate your faults, but you should do so calmly and peacefully, without fuss or anxiety. You must be patient when you see them and benefit from seeing your own lowliness. Unless you do this, your imperfections, of which you are acutely conscious, will disturb you even more and thus grow stronger. For nothing is more favorable to the growth of these weeds than our own anxiety and over-eagerness to get rid of them." End quote. These words truly are applicable at the personal, communal, and historical levels. Finally, as we think about the conversion of Paul, we think of all of the things he wrote to these fractious and fragmented communities all over Asia Minor. But think of his words. We still listen to them today. We know them by heart. What are the words that we speak to one another to help us in our own process of conversion? Paul tells us that the goal of conversion is full humanity in Jesus Christ, living the redeemed life, experiencing redemption, and being instruments of that through our rubbing up with one another in community. Sisters and brothers, the work of conversion, the work of redemption is not ours. If it were, we'd be right to give in to our fears. But the work of conversion is God's. Hence the call for trust and hope. And so I leave us with this question. Trusting in God, can we personally, communally, and historically snatch what God offers us each day with his outstretched hand? May God be praised.